Hearts of Iron 4 has been out since 2016, over 7 years now, and there have been many major changes since its initial release. One of the most consequential changes over the years, which will continually be updated probably with new and additional changes, is the designer system. There are also various other ways that HOI4 has been able to be customized, besides for the designer, which I will discuss later. While in the initial game, you were able to customize partially things like ships or planes through a point system, it wasn't equal to what you have today. The designer system allows you to make custom ship hulls, plane designs, or tank designs, wherever you choose, and there may even be future updates for gun designs, etc. First introduced with Man the Guns in February of 2019, this system was pretty innovative, and it does come with mixed reviews. While people do like being able to customize, I think there is a point where it becomes a meta-based system, especially in multiplayer. Looking at the designers, people usually follow one trend, and can't branch out and do whatever they want because they'll be weaker than opponents or enemy ships, or planes, or tanks. And while personally I do think the design is interesting, sometimes when you're overoccupied with other things, such as naval invasions, or fighting a long-term war, especially in multiplayer, it's sometimes hard to make nice designer customizations when you're in a time crunch. Personally, I have seen a lot of feedback that people wish there were some base templates like there were before the designer system for people who just want to pick things. It has also been mentioned, and I think would certainly be interesting, if they included a way to port over your previous designs to new games or updates. Therefore, you wouldn't have to redesign things, but once you unlock the technology, you could just copy and paste it in. This would certainly save a lot of time. The next DLC, which we got a new designer, was more than 2.5 years later, with No Step Back and the tank designer. Finally, with about a year later, in 2022, we received Blood Alone and the aircraft designer. As I mentioned before, I think there is still room for more designers if the devs want to add that, especially before releasing a HOI5, which will hopefully still have the designers. This could include something like a weapons designer for infantry, or an armor designer, or something etc. for however infantry operate. As right now we do have things for ships, for tanks, and for planes, but we don't have anything just for normal infantry. There obviously has been other things that have been added to HOI4 to make it more customizable. For example, the plentiful focus trees, which make the game more unique for whatever nation you play. Other means of customization include the upgraded Army Corps system, which allows you to spec into your specific generals, or the Peace Deal system, which is much more individualized than it was before its earlier updates. Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg for HOI4 customization, as over the past 7 years, that's really all they've done, adding in custom events, governments in exile, and other flavor to the game, which you didn't get before all these updates. And while certainly some of these features can run into issues, or they just don't work very well, i.e. the Peace Deal system, or they have problems in multiplayer, it's still nice that the devs have continually updated the game and we get new features. And if you don't like certain features, especially in multiplayer, you can use the multiplayer mod to get rid of certain focus trees, or just certain features that you think are bad for the game or ruin balance. There is a great coming up question on whether all these features will be added to HOI5, as Hearts of Iron 4 is over 7 years old now, and I would expect, like other Paradox games, they would be slowly ramping it down to update it for a new game, which they can sell for a full $60 or $70, or even more. I certainly could see the designer be brought into the other games, alongside features obviously like mission trees, even if they're more bare bones at the start of HOI5 release. But certain features which maybe didn't work so well, such as the Peace Deal, I could see them leaving behind. Certainly, a HOI5 would have greater graphics and a much better engine from its 7-year-old clunky self, which doesn't run very well, especially on older systems. That being said, I do appreciate all the customization added into HOI4, and when looking back on its initial release, over 7 years ago today, you can feel how different and bare bones the game really is. Without certain features, especially in single player, to occupy your time, I feel like the game would be boring. And while it's certainly true that I always liked HOI4 multiplayer, and I think HOI4 multiplayer hasn't dramatically changed since its initial release 7 years ago today, I do think that the features have been beneficial and just make the game overall more interesting. Therefore, I appreciate the devs adding in so much customization, and I think overall they've done very well with it, even if some things don't work so well. Sincerely, Wonder Productions.